Hello and welcome back to video 5 in this 6-part series, and I'm going to jump straight into this by clicking on plugins and talking about custom post types and advanced custom fields. Now, as you may remember from the previous video, we talked about all of the different plugins that we were using and the ones we recommended in our framework. Now, as you can see, I've tidied up, removed a few of them, added all of the licenses, and we're now ready to go. So the only two plugins I have left, and the reason that I wanted to do these specifically for this video is because I'm going to give you a working live example. Now, custom post type UI, let's start here. I'm going to activate this plugin. It's a free plugin by WebDev Studios. And what this allows us to do is, if we remember back to the first video when we first started this little series together, I talked to you about posts and pages and how pages is just a custom post type and that WordPress is made of different post types. And so we have all of these different post types that we can use, and we can use them to segment and to filter the data that comes into the site. Now, an example of this, and I'm just going to click on this down here where it says custom post type UI, and I'm going to, first of all, I can add a new post type, give it a label, single and plural, and some additional information. So not worrying too much about the additional information and the settings for now. We're going to keep that as it is. If I was to click across to edit post types, you'll see that I've already created one called legal. This post type is called legal. The plural is legal and the single is legal, and you can see on the left hand side here it is. Here is legal. So we've created, just by doing this, just by filling in this bit alone, we've created our own version. And if I open this and click on this, it's going to look exactly the same as posts. Here we go. And now I can add new. And what I've done is I've added all of my legal pages. This is part of the framework that we offer. We offer legal page templates. So there's terms and conditions, privacy policy, copyright notice, cookies policy. And what this allows me to do is keep all of my legal documents contained in one single place. Now, I could do these as pages, and most people do. Most people would create their pages, and all of this would be a page on their website. But for the purpose of this, I've created it as this custom post type. Now, let me take you back and let's create a new one. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a post type slug. Now, this can be used in many different contexts, but for now, for the purpose of this one, let's imagine that we wanted to create many different webinars. Okay, so I want the slug to be webinars. So plural is going to be webinars, signal will be webinar. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add this post type, and on the left hand side you can now see we have webinars. Okay, now I need to come back to edit this because I've not finished it yet. So let's click on webinars so that it loads, and let's scroll down. Now we could do all of the additional labels, but we don't need that. We're just going to look at the settings. So all of these settings, there are things that we need. Now, has archive. This is the difference between, is this a tag or a category? Okay, if we consider the parent-child responsibilities that I mentioned before and the ability to nest things, are we going to allow an archive to this? Is it going to be is it going to have parent-child relationships? And does it have an archive? So whether it has an archive means, does it have a slug? Remember that we created the slug webinar? So am I going to be able to search /webinar? I'll give you an example now. What I can do is I can actually go to the front end of my website now, and I can go /legal, because if you remember, we created the legal pages. So this is going to take me to the legal archive. Okay, now this has been built, so and we're going to go through this. I'm sorry if I'm jumping ahead, but what you can see here is the legal archive of the different posts that have been created within the custom post type. So the archive is legal. I have made, I've clicked true to say that it has an archive in legal, which allows me to search, and this shows me all of the posts, which I'm now showing here. And if I was to click on one of these, let's click on this, it will take me through to the single, and now this is the single. Okay, so we can now see this. So the idea behind this is that whilst we were here, We want to know, do we want to create an archive? So we've created an archive, and then we have made sure that it has parent-child relationships. We're going to keep scrolling down here. We're going to show it in the menu. Okay, and we can also create a menu icon. So this is what is using called dash icons. So if we come across the dash icons and just do a quick search, click on the top one, it's only limited. There's not many options here. But let's try and find something for webinar. What would we say would be a good icon for a webinar? I would say I'm going to use this one. And actually, this is money, but it's not. Well, maybe it is money. Maybe we're trying to, get people to sign up for a webinar. But I think this would be good for a webinar. So we take this here, we copy this. Okay, so we've come across to our dash icons. We come back here, and all we do is we type in this class. There we go. Okay, now if I was to, or we can add our own icon, but then it needs to be specific. So we're just going to do it using those. And the last thing that we need to do here is what does it support? Now, for the webinar, do we want the title? Well, yes, we do want a title. Do we need the featured image? Well, yes, we do. Do we need the text editor? Well, I'm going to say no, we don't. Okay, and so by saying that, I can then save this. Okay, and now you can see webinar. Webinar has changed. It's got the little icon, and if I click on webinars, I can add a new webinar. I can add a title, but there's no content area. I've removed the content area. Because what most people do and what most people are used to is if you add a new page and you click add new page, most people, they'll put in a title and then they'll start writing. But I've removed the ability to do this. I've removed this content area from this custom post type. And you may be asking why, and that will be a very good question. But I'm going to just make sure you understand and you're okay with custom post types. So for now, the ability to create these custom post types, we've got legal, I've now got this new webinar. We can do as many of these as we want. You can create directories. You can do lots of different things. You could have one for opt-ins and keep all your opt-ins in one place. And there's many reasons to do this. I'll explain later. But for now, just know that this is a good way. You do not have to rely on pages for everything. In fact, if we click on pages, you'll see these are the only pages that I have. And in fact, because I've removed WooCommerce now, these are not set. But these are all of the pages. That's it. Everything else that I have is going to be done through custom post types. Okay, so now that we've covered custom post type UI and we've covered the post types, I now want to cover what are called taxonomies. So a taxonomy, which I briefly mentioned at the start, is the ability to filter. Okay, so I want to create my own taxonomy. So if we're going to do webinars, how would we want to categorize or how would we want to filter the webinars? Now, maybe we're going to do this by type. So maybe this is going to be webinar type. And we always try and keep the slug so it's relevant. Okay, and we're just going to call this type. I could call it, if I wanted to, webinar type. Webinar type, and actually that would be webinar types. Now, where do we want to attach this taxonomy? Where do we want to attach this filter? It should be called filters. I don't know why it's called taxonomies. And I'm going to attach it to the post type webinars. So if I hover over webinars at the moment, we can see all webinars or add new. But as soon as I add this taxonomy, now we can see webinars, add new, and we can see webinar types. So very, very important, and I can do a lot of things here. I can show this in the quick edit panel. I can show it in the admin column. Do we want to allow a rewrite of the URLs? We can choose that if we want that to be true. Lots of different things here. Is it going to be parent-child? And again, this is exactly where it is between categories and tags. Because if I created one here called categories and did this as true and one called tags and did it as false, that would be the difference. So that's been done now. I'm just going to edit the taxonomy for webinar types because I didn't go through and do all of this. So let's just make all of these true as standard. Yes, yes, yes. Now that's done, I can save this taxonomy. So now let's come back up to webinars. Click on all webinars and let's create a new webinar. So now very much the same on the left hand side, but what we can see now here on the right hand side is webinar types. So let's add a new webinar type and let's call this basic training, or you can do whatever you want. I might just instead want to call this an opt-in webinar. No. Lots of different things I can do. Could be part of a sales funnel. There's lots of different webinar types I could have. Anyway, just to show you here. So we're going to do this as a basic training webinar, okay? And this webinar is going to be called Understanding WordPress. And we can go ahead and we can publish that. So now I can click on webinar types and we're going to see all of the different options that we've just created, and we can create more here. This is exactly the same as if I went up to posts and I clicked on categories. We can see them here. Or if I clicked on tags, we can see them here. So now you get the understanding and the idea of how we can create custom post types, custom taxonomies, how we can attach the taxonomy to the webinar. And now if I click on all webinars, you can even see the webinar types, and we can filter. We can filter based on all of the things we need, and if we need to filter more, we can look at all of the ones that are for basic training, for example. So lots and lots of options, lots of things that we can do here, lots of ways that we can customize this. Now, the reason that I wanted to do this and show you this is because that was part 1 of this training. What I'm going to now show you in part 2 is advanced custom fields. So I need to go back to my plugins, and I need to enable the final plugin in this whole series, Advanced Custom Fields. Now I'm using Advanced Custom Fields Pro. You can use a free version, but I do recommend the Pro version. And this now gives me what are called custom fields. So the first thing I need to do in custom fields is add a field group. So let's add a new field group, and we're going to call this webinar. Now what this is going to allow us to do is add custom fields. So the first thing I want to know, the webinar headline. I'm going to want to know the webinar headline, but that is going to be the title, so I don't need that. But maybe I want what is called a webinar introduction. Okay, so the first thing it has is its name. Now this is going to be its slug or its meta tag, its field name, and the label is what we know. So I could just call this introduction. But I want to try and keep these relevant. So rather than just calling this intro, I've called it webinar underscore intro. And if it gets more detailed, I may do more underscores and make it longer. But I want to make sure this is relevant, because if you start to create lots of these, lots of custom fields, lots of custom post types, one of the things you will start to struggle with, especially in the database, is understanding what goes where. So you want to be as descriptive as possible here. Now the introduction is a text area, so the field type is a text area, and that's all I need to do for that. So now let's add another field, and this one is going to be maybe a video. So we'll call this video, we'll call it webinar underscore video, and this is going to be a URL which we're going to grab from YouTube, for example. Okay, and then we're going to add a new field, and this is going to be, well, we need to know the date, don't we? So what is going to be the date? So the webinar date. We scroll down all of these different options. We want a date picker, but we're actually going to go for date and time. So we're going to have a date and time picker, and then we can choose the format of how we want this to look. Okay, so this is how it's going to look. So we have that option. So now that we have all of this information and everything is here the way that we need it, we can then go ahead and we can publish. Okay, so I'm going to do that now. Introduction, video, date, and the title. Okay, and let's just leave that for there, because that's all let's imagine that's all we need for this. Or what we could do, actually, while we're here, let me add another field, and this one is called, let's call this the opt-in. So this is going to be the opt-in for the webinar, and the field type is going to be a tab. Now the reason I'm going to do that, and I'll show you that, is because I can now drag this at the top, reorder them, and so within the opt-in there's the introduction video, and there's the date of the webinar. Okay, then I'm going to add another field. This one is going to be called live, and again I'm going to do another tab, and you'll start to understand this in a little while why I'm doing this. So this needs to have, we've got the title, so we don't need to do that, but what we might need to do is the video. So again, another URL. So this one can be the video again. This could be webinar, now it's live video. So rather than having webinar video, and I might even want to change this to be webinar opt-in video. So you start to understand how I'm changing this now. Webinar intro, webinar date, webinar opt-in video, webinar live video, because they're different. If I just did webinar video, I then have webinar video 2, or I couldn't do that. So I'd need to have it in a way that I can tell the difference. Because if I only saw a list of meta tags, I'd want to understand what all of these are. Okay, and then maybe I'm going to want a URL for people on the webinar to purchase, for example. So let's just say call to action. Okay, and this is going to be webinar CTA. Okay, and then we're going to do that as a URL. Okay, so that's all of the information that we need. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to update this. And that is the first bit of information, is creating the fields. The second bit of information we need to add is the display rules. Where is this going to show? Now we've got lots and lots of information here. If it's a form, a user, a page, a post, and between this we can pretty much do anything we want. We're going to keep it really simple. We want this to show up when our post type is equal to webinar. When the post type is equal to webinar, we want this to show up, okay? So then we're just going to update this. Now let's go back and let's look at our webinars. Now if we go into our webinar, remember before we removed the ability to add content. But now because we've added our custom fields, we can see within here we have the opt-in. So this is our introduction text, video, youtube.com, date, and if I click on this it automatically gives me a date picker. So let's do this tomorrow at 12 p.m. Okay, and now we've got our tabs that we created, so I can come to live, do the live video, okay, call to action, and we can create this to be whatever we want, and we can go as deep as we want with this. Okay, so this is going to be basic training video. All right, it's going to make me a it's good. It makes me actually put in a URL that exists because it's saying that that one didn't exist. So let's just do that. There we go. Update, validation successful. This is now live. Now all of this information known as metadata has been stored in the database under the tables relevant for this post. Okay, so if I click on all webinars, all of that information is under that post. If I now create a new post, it's blank. I can do it again. I can do webinar 2, and I could say that this is going to be, this is information about webinar 2. Okay, and I can go ahead and I can publish this. Now you can see we have a new link. So if I now come back to the overview and I look at webinar, this is the archive, and I haven't created a template yet. I'm going to do that in the next video. But what I am showing you right now is you can see we have this webinar and this webinar, and if I click on this, there'll be nothing there. It's just the title because we haven't built our template yet. But what I wanted to show you is how we can see the archive, we can see this, and we can start to pull this information through. Now, that's all you need to know about building custom post types and about building custom fields. One of the things I would say, which is really good to know, is that when you are actually out there and you are building your custom fields, one of the things that you can do to make it better is you can use what's called repeater fields. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail in this because it's quite complex to go through, but let's just say, for example, that if I'm in here and I wanted somebody to be able to, or I wanted to add, I don't know, I'm just going to do this example. I know it's not relevant to this, but let's just say I wanted to do social media, okay? And this is going to be what is called a repeater field. Then it adds subfields, and then what I can do in the subfields is I can create new. So this might be platform. Now I know I'm not doing a field label for the purpose of this text. This might be, we could say, a radio button, so it's going to be a drop down, and then we have choices. So let's say Facebook, Twitter, and let's say LinkedIn. Can't forget Instagram. Okay, so those are going to be the first options. Then what I can do is add another field, and I might want to know what the handle is. What's your social media handle? And that can just be a text field, okay? And then what I might want to know finally is the URL. What's your social media URL? There we go, all done. Now I can go ahead and I can update this. Okay, all of that is now in that repeater field. If I come back to webinars, just look at all webinars, and I'm only doing this as an example, this isn't something I would actually do, but I want you to see what it does. I can then come here, click on live, and now you can see I've got this repeater field, and I can add a row, I can choose the platform, choose the handle, choose the URL. And I can go ahead and I can create a new one. I might want to do this as a drop down, so I could actually come back here, open this up, choose the platform, and actually not a radio button, I want to do it as a select box instead. Okay, and where is this in the overview here? So I can close all this down, and if I open that up, okay, it could say here add row. I could say add new social media. Okay, and that's just something that I can do there. So let's just update this, come back to here and refresh this just so that you can see it. And I know it's still in the live tab. I could put it into a different tab if I wanted to. But now we can see, look, add new social media. I click this, nice and clean. I click on here. Oh, I didn't add any options, but I would normally select the option, select the handle, select the URL, and update. So this is everything that you need to take WordPress to the next level. So this is taking WordPress as a basic WordPress and kind of taking it to the next level. This is what WordPress was intended for. This is what a lot of developers understand, and this is what a lot of business owners don't understand. People say, I don't get WordPress, I don't understand WordPress. What's so good about WordPress? Well, this is it. It is the ability to create loops. A loop is something that repeats over and over again, and we see that on the archive pages when we look at posts. We create lots of different posts and then we can loop them to keep showing all of the different posts. Something else is called the query, the WordPress query. So we have the WordPress loop, we have the WordPress query. We also have the WordPress template hierarchy, which we'll go through, which involves the custom post types and it involves the filtering system. All of this stuff combined is what makes WordPress just what it is basically, and it's why, because it's under GPL licensing, because anybody can access it, it's why there are tens of thousands of developers. Pretty much anything that you want has already been created, and you just need to navigate all of the crap that's out there to only get the stuff that's relevant for you. And that's what we do in our academy. We teach you everything you need to know, from building pages, everything. All of this stuff, everything I'm doing here, this is actually part of one of my courses, but I just kind of wanted to give it to you as part of this series, as part of an introduction. So I hope it helps. I hope you understand now a lot more about custom post types and advanced custom fields, and you can see how this can be used. Join me in the final video, in the next video, where I will talk through Elementor and I will show you how to build custom post templates, and I will actually build out a webinar opt-in page, and we'll do it all in Elementor using the information that we've saved here. Okay, I look forward to joining you in the next video and wrapping up the rest of this Introduction to WordPress series.